Hey everybody, welcome back to the Point. Hope we all been doing well over the last little while. It's been a minute since I've recorded a podcast, but I'm back with you all. We're towards the end of July. A lot's happening in the sports world. Took a break, needed a break, just everything in my life. I'm happy to be back with all of you today, and the schedule will continue. Frequent episodes, at least 3 a week, and there's a lot happening. There's a lot happening right now. Yes, it is July 29th, and normally it's kind of a dead period in sports where you have baseball and you get some UFC news, but the Olympics have started in France, and I have a love-hate relationship with the Olympics. I've talked about this many times, but to me, bronze, silver, there's no other platform in athletics where we celebrate, second and third. When somebody wins the Stanley Cup final, we don't care who loses to them. We care who wins the Stanley Cup. Major League Baseball, who won the World Series? It's not, oh, there's the runner-up. Let's give them a participation trophy. So I have that beef with the Olympics. I count gold medals. The country with the highest number of gold medals will win the count. They will be the victors of the Paris Olympics. Today, Canada won 2 gold medals. They won in judo and in swimming. 2 women taking home golds. Phenomenal stuff. Great story. 17-year-old Summer McIntosh is a superstar in the water. It's a phenomenal run for her. She won silver or second place earlier this week. But she is maybe the best athlete that we have. She's dominant in the pool, and she could be around for many Olympics to come doing it for Canada. It's awesome. Basketball is ongoing. Canada defeated Greece in the opening game. They will play tomorrow. Our women's team lost earlier today to France, getting destroyed. I think it'll be very tough for either the men or the women to medal. Tough fields, more talent on other teams, but it's interesting to watch nonetheless. The tennis is interesting. Novak Djokovic played Rafael Nadal today on court Philippe Chatrier, which is the main court of the French Open. Djokovic winning that match in straight sets. You have to wonder if that's the last time we'll see Rafael Nadal playing at Roland Garros, playing on the red clay. We know it will be for Andy Murray. We'll see what happens for Rafael Nadal. So I'm going to track the Olympics. The track and field in week 2 is always phenomenal. The opening ceremonies, I didn't watch them live, but the thing about opening ceremonies, it's always a big thing, talked about a lot, but it's kind of more pomp and circumstance than it is let's talk about the athletes. It can be billed that way, it can be marketed that way, although it's a lie. It's more about what can you do, what's interesting. Really, Paris embarrassed themselves this year in their opening ceremonies. If you're not familiar, I'm not going to get into a political stance on this or just common sense. But if you missed it, go look it up. If the argument is we're going to make it about the athletes, if the argument is we want to celebrate the different countries, they didn't do that. They made it about something else. They made it about something that really did not need to be touched. Talked about too much as is. And I think Paris, and I think a lot of people are upset with them and are not watching the Olympics. I'm not religious. I'm the farthest thing from religious. But what happened, what the depiction was wrong. And if I was religious, I would be offended. Because that picture, the Last Supper, is something that means something to religious communities. Doesn't mean anything to me. But I wouldn't want something that I hold value, that I hold dear, to be made fun of, to be put into a punchline of a joke that really can't be brought back. And that's what happened on Friday. So I'm going to track the Olympics. It's always fun to watch. I prefer the winter over the Summer Olympics. But that display on Friday, it was in a nutshell of what our society is now, what we view as an important thing to talk about. And it's the farthest thing from an important conversation. It's the farthest thing from an important discussion point. History is history. It cannot be changed. That's something you learn. A picture is worth 1,000 words. I'm sure you've heard that saying once or twice in your life. And that picture will exist now for a long time. And it's unfortunate that it will. Let's pivot to the NFL. NFL training camps are open. Lots happening. Aaron Rodgers at Jets camp, but Hassan Reddick, who they traded for in the offseason from the Eagles. He wants a new contract. He wants more money, more guaranteed money. And there's always drama with Aaron Rodgers. So you have the Jets camp. You have the New York Giants, who released former CFLer Canadian quarterback Nathan Rourke yesterday. He was the fourth quarterback on their depth chart behind Daniel Jones, Drew Lock, and Tommy DeVito. So this gives Nathan Rourke an opportunity to sign with another team in training camp or potentially head north of the border and rejoin the CFL, which for his long-term career might be the better play. So that's interesting. You have Brandon Ayuk, Trent Williams, CeeDee Lamb, all players around the NFL who are at training camp but are holding in. They are present. They will not be fined, but they are not participating in practice. They are not taking hits. They are not participating in drills until they get their contract situation worked out. I think this is the best play. I think this is professional. You're there. You're in the meetings. You're hearing cadence. You're talking to your coaches. You're talking to your teammates. But you also are aware that you have to get business done. You are also aware that, you know what? I have to do what's good for me. And I know I could get an injury next year and my career could never be the same. So I need to get paid. Showing up and doing it this way, I have all the respect in the world for. Credit to Brandon Ayuk, credit to Trent Williams, credit to CeeDee Lamb of the Dallas Cowboys. Two quarterbacks who are doing the same thing, Jordan Love, Tua Tagovailoa, are now full participants in practice Because over the weekend, these two guys got paid. It started with Tua Tagovailoa, the quarterback of the Miami Dolphins, if you're not aware. Led the NFL in passing last year. Has led the Miami Dolphins to back-to-back playoff seasons, playoff appearances. First Dolphins quarterback to do that since Dan Marino, and Dan Marino hasn't played for a long time. But Tua's had concussion issues. Tua's had hip problems dating back to his time at Alabama. And they didn't have to give him a contract. They could have let him play out the year. They could have franchise tagged him if he had another year. They could have franchise tagged him the year after that. But the Dolphins looked around and said, are we going to get a better quarterback than Tua? The Miami Dolphins, rightly so, believe that they can compete for the AFC East title. And they absolutely can this year, despite the fact that the Dolphins lost a number of really important players in free agency, including Christian Wilkins, who's been the best player on their defense for some time now. Losing Xavier Howard, their cornerback, but bringing in guys like Odell Beckham Jr., bringing in a new defensive coordinator. This team is interesting. This team likes to play high-profile offense with Waddle, with Hill, with OBJ, with Raheem Mostert, who led the NFL in touchdowns last year. And the Dolphins gave Tua 4 years, $212 million, which means he'll be making $52 million per season, which is less than Joe Burrow, less than Josh Allen, less than the guy we'll talk about next, but puts him in the top 5 of quarterback salaries and makes him one of the highest paid quarterbacks in the league. I would not have given Tua this contract because I would have franchise tagged him and I would have let him play it out that way. The Washington Commanders, formerly the Redskins at the time, did this with Kirk Cousins. They gave him back-to-back franchise tags, and they could have gave him a third one, but they decided to let him go because it was too much money. In those 2 years with Kirk D. Cousins, the Washington then Redskins did not make the playoffs one time. But they had good quarterback play, they wanted to compete, and they did it. But after years of failure, they let Kirk walk to Minnesota, and they moved on. And they might only have their quarterback of the future now in Jaden Daniels, but they went through some unfortunate stuff. They had one of the worst owners in team sports history. They had the Alex Smith horrible injury, him coming back, that great story. They drafted a quarterback in Dwayne Haskins who unfortunately passed away while walking on the highway. But they went through tough times, but my point here is they were not locked in long-term to a quarterback, and it gave them the flexibility to be creative or to move in any direction that they saw fit. Tua's incredibly talented. He's a very good quarterback, but I believe his system and his situation are better than Tua is at the quarterback position. What I mean by that is Mike McDaniel is one of the best play callers in football, period. Tyreek Hill is one of the best wide receivers in football, period. Jalen Waddle has had over 1,000 receiving yards in every one of his seasons so far, and he's played in 4 NFL seasons. That's not that easy to do. Raheem Mostert's become a touchdown machine. Tua's good when he's on the field, no doubt about it. But he's not that athletic. He's lost a lot of weight going into this season because he wants to use his legs more. I don't want him running the football. I don't want him taking hits. I remember him playing the Cincinnati Bengals on a Thursday night, and it looked like he was dead on the field. Not an exaggeration. Miami has a quarterback, and Miami knows very well what it's like to not have one. Matt Moore, Ryan Tannehill, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Chad Pennington. They went through lists, names of guys. My childhood, I rooted for the Miami Dolphins. And rooting for the Miami Dolphins was a sad thing to do because they never won anything. They never had good players. They had Cameron Wake, who should be in the Hall of Fame one day. They had Jarvis Landry, receivers that were decent. But it was never that impressive. It was never that interesting. So now they have Tua, and they go, well, he's pretty good. And it's going to be hard to get a guy better than him. Absolutely true. Because Mahomes isn't leaving Kansas City. Josh Allen isn't leaving Buffalo. Jordan Love isn't leaving Green Bay. Jared Goff isn't leaving Detroit. Matthew Stafford could be available. But you're going to sign up for an aging quarterback who's had a lot of injuries himself? They tried the aging quarterback thing, and they couldn't get Tom Brady to go to Miami. He went to Tampa Bay instead. So they stick with the guy they know is pretty good, who's gotten them to back-to-back postseasons. I just think you keep him on this number. The draft can provide a whole lot of... We saw this year. Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., so many quarterbacks were off the board. I believe this year in college football, we're going to see a pretty decent quarterback class. Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. I like him a lot. I think he can develop into something. Dylan Gabriel transferring over from Oklahoma to Oregon, playing under Dan Lanning. That should be interesting. Bo Nix had a lot of success after transferring. Jalen Milroe for the Alabama Crimson Tide. The Georgia Bulldogs. There's always options. There's drafts. I like flexibility. I don't like being locked into something. Some people like security. And I understand why Tua would want it. He's getting a pile of money. It's going to change his life, change his family's life forever. And just people in regular life security. We like to know this. We like to know what we make. We like to know that we're going to go grocery shopping at 5:30 every Wednesday at Sobeys. And I'm not saying it's one's right, one's wrong. If you have Patrick Mahomes, you are locking him in until the day he dies, if you can, if you're the Kansas City Chiefs. But Tua Tagovailoa is not Patrick Mahomes. Patrick Mahomes is Bugatti. He's an incredible vehicle that has so much value. You put it on the road, you look at it, people love the car. Tua's a Ford Ranger. It's a fine vehicle. It'll get you from point A to point B. I wouldn't want it because it's a Ford, but it's fine. I think the Dolphins so desperately want that security. Their fans really like Tua for the most part. If you're on Twitter, it's a vile place if you are not a fan of Tua Tagovailoa. They will let you know about it. Take my word for it. So they keep him. And now they move into this year hoping that their roster is good enough to win the AFC East. Hoping that their roster is good enough to host a playoff game for the first time in over 20 years. With the Bills, who on paper are worse to start the season than they were last year. with the Patriots, who stink, and with the New York Jets, who are the New York Jets. They could be great. They could win 11 games. They could win 4. Who the hell knows? I love it. Far away from Miami, completely different weather pattern, completely different vibe. The Green Bay Packers have been the best franchise at recognizing quarterback talent. Bart Starr, Brett Favre, Aaron Rodgers, and now Jordan Love. Jordan Love, who sat behind Aaron Rodgers for multiple seasons, a guy who they traded up in the first round to get, who might have been the best quarterback in the NFL over the last 8 games of last year, only throwing 2 interceptions during that 8-game span. And then going into the playoffs and torching the Dallas Cowboys in Jerry World. After watching last year, seeing enough on film, the Green Bay Packers gave Jordan Love 4 years, $220 million, the largest 4-year extension in NFL history, $155 million in guarantees, and $75 million guaranteed at signing. This makes Jordan Love the highest paid player in league history. This makes Jordan Love making more money than Joe Burrow, than Mahomes, than Josh Allen. But the Packers lock up their quarterback of the future. Now, I just talked about the Tua situation and how it was unique and how I would have went a different way. I wouldn't have given him the money. I think the Packers made the right call with Jordan Love. I think Jordan Love is elite. Jordan Love does not have the receiving core that Tua does. He was throwing passes to Jaden Reed, who was a rookie out of Michigan State, who had a pretty good year. He was using his running backs to make things happen. The Packers were talented, sure, but they had their problems. They had to fight their way to get to the playoffs. They had to be in a division with the Vikings, be in a division with the Detroit Lions. Jordan Love can make every throw. He's athletic when he needs to be. He's big. He's got a huge arm. He's fearless throwing the ball down the field. And I think he's going to be a star in the league for years to come. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money, but when a quarterback needs a contract, it's about next man up. And you normally don't see a guy take less than the guy previous to him. It's, okay, he got that, I'm getting this. You made $50 million, I'm going to make 51. That's just the way it works in the NFL. Is Jordan Love better than Mahomes? No. Is he better than Josh Allen? No, not yet anyway. Is he better than Matthew Stafford right now? No. Is he better than a healthy Joe Burrow? No. But he's a top 10 quarterback. The Packers are the most storied, the most unique franchise in NFL history, one of the most unique franchises in the world of sports. You hear the Packers, you know the colors. Sports fans don't know. And they go, oh, the Green Bay Packers. Yes, of course. Lambeau Field. He is that good that you keep him, you build around him, and you try to win. Looking at the Packers roster going into this season, and later in the month we will start our series on every team, on each division preview. Josh Jacobs comes over, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, Jaden Reed, Luke Musgrave, tight end at Oregon State. I like their defense. Packers were a playoff team last year. They will be expected to be a playoff team again in a much tougher NFC North because the Bears are a lot better with Caleb Williams, the number 1 overall pick. The Vikings are interesting. I don't know what they're going to be yet, but they're an interesting team. The Lions are loaded. The Lions were in the NFC Championship. They should have been in the Super Bowl last year, the Detroit Lions. If they don't screw up a couple plays, they are. So, to me, Jordan Love's a better quarterback than Tua, so you give him the money. Is he worth it right now? No. But that is besides the point. Because he is one of the best, because he's an uber talent, you decide to do it. I don't think they'll regret it. The Packers predominantly are a smart organization. They don't give out bad contracts to players that they don't value. You could view Aaron as the one and Brett Favre as guys that they gave them to. Guys that stuck around too long. But Jordan Love will have a lot of pressure this year. He'll be expected to be a great quarterback. He'll be expected to lead that team to the playoffs and compete for the NFC North crown. Absolutely. But I believe he'll be ready for the challenge. He'll be ready to take on whoever he has to go toe-to-toe with Jared Goff, toe-to-toe with Sam Darnold or J.J. McCarthy in Minnesota, toe-to-toe with Caleb Williams in Chi-Town. A lot of money, but the Packers should have did it, and they did. Now that kind of leaves Dak Prescott, who's another quarterback who needs a new contract. He's not going to get one from Dallas. Dallas is in this weird position where they should have sold some pieces in the offseason. They probably should have cut or traded Dak Prescott. And now they're just in a complete mess. Because I don't believe their team's that good. I think they're going to be in tough to make the playoffs. I don't think they're going to win their division. This is a spoiler. I think the Commanders are a better team than people give them credit for. I think they're going to be more competitive than years past. The Eagles are under a ton of pressure. Coach is on the hot seat, just like the Cowboys. It's a division that can go any way. Anything can happen with that division. And the Giants, who the hell knows with the Giants? But you look around, Dak is on his last year of his deal, as is head coach Mike McCarthy. Well, that's not great. Quarterback, head coach both need new deals. They're both not going to get them. So they're lame ducks going in to the season. Dak said he'd be open to playing elsewhere. The Cowboys clearly are open to him playing elsewhere because they're not giving him a contract. I think Dak's pretty good. I don't disagree with the Cowboys' strategy because it gives you flexibility. But why not do it last summer? Why not do it this winter? Make that decision. Why keep him around So he needs a contract. Also, CD Lamb needs a deal. You didn't give him money after Justin Jefferson got his huge contract. Should have signed him before that. Micah Parsons wants a check. He technically does not have to get signed yet, but he wants one. He wants to be around long term. Are you going to keep him around if your team's not going to be competitive? If you're looking for a new quarterback, if your skill position players are dropping like flies? The Cowboys are a mess. A mess. And they may make the playoffs. I'm not sure yet. They need a lot to go right for them, for me to see them make the playoffs. But it's just a disaster of a training camp where everything's just not about what's on the field. It's about what's off the field. When's CD Lamb going to show up? When's this going to happen? We don't know. Because it's just a cluster expletive right now in Big D. But the NFL, oh, it's back in our lives. And that's a great thing. The NFL brings me so much joy. Also news, Canadian quarterback Nathan Rourke goes unclaimed after being waived by the Giants. He is now a free agent. That's a Dave Naylor of TSN reporting that. So I think that's the best thing for him. He can talk to other teams. If there is NFL interest, he can join a club that truly feels he'd have a chance, that he'd have options. If I'm Nathan Rourke, I'm looking around. He was in New England briefly last year in Jacksonville. Jacksonville still has Trevor Lawrence and CJ Beathard. So he'd be the number 3. And he's probably going to be the number 3 anywhere he goes. New England would be interesting because they have Drake May, who I think is going to sit. And they have Jacoby Brissett, who I think will be their week 1 start. New England might not be a bad place to go back to, but it's a different regime. They might not want Nathan back on the roster. Indy would be interesting because you have Anthony Richardson, who's injury prone. You also have Joe Flacco. Could be good to learn from Joe Flacco. Could be opportunity there as the season goes along, just thinking out loud here. Denver's got a bunch of quarterbacks. They have a quarterback competition, so that's not the best spot for them. Carolina could be interesting. Bad team, bad organization. However, I think there are possibilities for him. But it's going to be tough because he's not an NFL quarterback right now. He'll play in the preseason. He'll get reps. He'll go to a practice squad. But he's fighting for his life. And this might be the crossroads for him to go, you know what? I'm going back to Canada. I'm going back to play. They just wrapped up week 8 in the CFL last night. The Edmonton Elks could certainly use a quarterback. They stink. They stink, and they could use a quarterback. I'm sure he doesn't want to go play for the Elks, but there's an opening there. Toronto Argonauts with Chad Kelly suspended could use a quarterback. I still think BC owns his right, so they have to make a decision. They have Vernon Adams Jr., who has played pretty good football this year, who likely will be a MOP candidate. But again, Nathan Rourke was special when he played for BC the last time he was in the CFL. You have to think about your options. I hope he lands with another NFL team before he makes that decision to come back to Canada, because I do think the kid has talent. But we'll see. But he goes unclaimed earlier today. The NFL preseason starts Thursday, if you didn't know. Canton, Ohio, the Hall of Fame game, Texans, Bears. Sounds like Caleb Williams will get some snaps for the Chicago Bears in that game, potentially, which I'm in favor of that. Two teams that I think will be playoff teams come January. Two teams that have a lot of talent, two teams that have two really good quarterbacks. That's Thursday night in Canton. We'll talk about that more as we get through the week. But the NFL is back, and I'm thrilled. Let's pivot to baseball. Tomorrow night around this time, it's the MLB trade deadline. No more waiver wire, no more August debt. This is it. Make your deals, get your players, and set your rosters. It's been busy over the last couple of days in Major League Baseball. And two teams in particular have been noticeable. And let's start with the team up here, the Toronto Blue Jays. The Jays, who swept the reigning World Series champion Texas Rangers over the weekend, who are currently losing 11-4 to the AL East leading Baltimore Orioles. The Toronto Blue Jays have said a lot. We want to be competitive in 2025. This was an anomaly of a season. We believe that we're better than this. Rumors about trading Bo Bichette, rumors about trading Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who hit his 20th home run of the season today. I don't believe either of the core pieces will be traded by the trade deadline tomorrow night. But the Jays have traded a lot of other pieces, as they are 46-59, I believe, right now. They are trying to claw towards 500, but they'll be well below 500 by the end of the year. Started with the Jays trading Jaime Garcia to the Seattle Mariners. They get a center fielding prospect in the trade who a lot of people like. Garcia really was the most consistent bullpen arm for the Blue Jays all year long. Eric Swanson's been a disaster. Tim Meza, they DFA'd. Jordan Romano's been injured all year long, practically. And they just haven't had consistent bullpen arms available for them. Jaime Garcia was great. Seattle wants him. They're still pushing for the playoffs. They're still pushing to win the AL West, despite the fact that the Houston Astros have played some really good baseball since mid-June. They pick up Jaime Garcia. Then Danny Jansen was traded from the Blue Jays to the rival Boston Red Sox. They wanted some catcher depth, Wanted a guy that can hit for power. And Danny Jansen leaves to join the Red Sox. They don't get a whole lot back. Jansen doesn't really hit for average. Another guy who's injury prone, who can hit home runs, has been a solid Blue Jay for a long time, but expiring contract. They have to figure out what they want to do with the catcher position for years to come because they screwed that up trading Gabriel Moreno for Dalton Varsho. But Danny Jansen goes to the rival Boston Red Sox. Nate Pearson quietly traded to the Chicago Cubs, the Cubs who are busy despite the fact that their season has really been an unmitigated disaster so far. Nate Pearson, who is he a bullpen arm? Is he a starter? Nobody really knows. He's been inconsistent. He hasn't really found his form in the major leagues ever. They've tried to make him a seventh inning guy. He has not been very good for the Blue Jays. I do think getting a change of scenery for him is a good thing. Also for the Jays, just to kind of both move on, both try different things. Maybe the Chicago Cubs will try him as a starting pitcher, which is he was intended to be from the beginning. But Nate Pearson, another bullpen arm, moves from the Blue Jays to the Chicago Cubs. And then this afternoon, Justin Turner, World Series champion, veteran of the clubhouse, was traded to the Seattle Mariners with his teammate Jaime Garcia. He's not really a prize anymore. Aging player who is a DH, doesn't really play a position. They get outfield prospect RJ Schreck. He's 39. He'll help Seattle. They're hoping to make the playoffs. This gives him an opportunity to maybe make the playoffs in maybe his last Major League Baseball season. So I'm happy for Justin Turner. He had a red-hot start to the season, but he kind of fell off. He's not an everyday player anymore, and he was in the Blue Jays because their roster just isn't that good. But he gets traded, they get Schreck, who's batting .250 in the minors this season with 12 homers and 45 RBIs. Turner, 6 home runs, 31 RBIs in 90 games this season for the Blue Jays. So the Blue Jays still have Yusei Kikuchi, who was looked at as one of the best starting pitchers available. You had Garrett Crochet with the White Sox. However, he didn't pitch all that well yesterday in the loss. He's already pitched the most innings he ever has at the Major League level this season. So there's some concerns about his durability, if he'll be able to pitch in October. Also, his agent has come out and said that he will not be pitching in October unless he gets a new contract, which you don't see that happen that often. And the White Sox they're on pace to have the worst season ever. And Crochet's, they got that bottled up. But I think for the Blue Jays, this was the way to do it. I wouldn't trade Vladdy because he still has value and you may want to stick around and play for your team for years to come. Bo Bichette, you can decide what you want to do with him in the offseason. He has no value right now because his calf sucks and he's never available to play. So if he's healthy, teams are interested, sure, consider it. They're going to have Kevin Gausman to start next year. They're likely going to have Chris Bassett unless they deal him between now and tomorrow night. I'm not buying the plan that they're a World Series threat in 2025. I'm not, because the roster has not been a World Series threat since Shapiro and Atkins have got to Toronto. They never have. They haven't won a playoff game. Blue Jays and the Maple Leafs are quite similar because they had brand name players and they had a whole lot of talk, but that doesn't mean you're any good. So the Blue Jays have some good things, but they have some faults. If I was them, I'd rather blow it up than try to run it back and pretend to be a contending team in 2025 because they're not going to be. They will not be better than the Baltimore Orioles to start next year. There's no way. The Orioles have so many options. The Orioles have so many young players. They can trade prospects for players on their roster right now. The Orioles, the Yankees, yes, they've gone through their problems. They had an awful stretch. However, they do have Aaron Judge. They did take 2 out of 3 against the Boston Red Sox this weekend. And they acquired Jazz Chisholm in a trade with the Miami Marlins. Will the Jays be better than the Red Sox at the start of next season? Will they be better than the Rays, who they are not better than right now? I'm not convinced. It's easy to say that you will be. We're going to be contender in 2020. That's all lip service. They have to do it. They have to spend the money. They spent a lot of money this year. They're the 10th highest payroll in baseball. And they're going to miss the playoffs by a lot. The Orioles, the Guardians, the Astros, teams with much smaller payrolls are going to make it in over the Blue Jays. And that's infuriating. If your ownership going, how? We gave you all this stuff and our team sucks. We had to sell season ticket packages in late July because we don't trust people are going to want to do it after seeing how we play in August and September. And it's going to be shit. So, we'll see. But they've been active. They've been selling pieces. It's the way they should approach it. Tampa Bay Rays have done the exact same thing as the Blue Jays. The Rays are still technically in the mix to make the playoffs this year. But they have a lot of expiring contracts. And they went, you know what? Let's be honest. Sure, we're 3 back of the Royals. We're 2 games above 500. We have some pretty good starting pitching. Taj Bradley's been phenomenal for us this year. But we're not better than the Red Sox. We're not better than the Twins. The Yankees are a whole lot better than us. We play in the AL East, so we have a tough schedule the last 2 months. Let's move some pieces. Their biggest move was trading their all-star third baseman, Isaac Paredes, to the Chicago Cubs for Christopher Morel, who can play third, can play second, can play center field. He's a utility player. It's a straight-up baseball trade, if you will. 2 roster players going for one another, which you rarely see in a baseball move. I don't mind it. Paredes is a big bat. The Cubs clearly like him. The Cubs are a team like the Rays who are not going to win their division. A team like the Rays who are not going to make the playoffs. Now, the Cubs are spending a whole lot more money. They're spending $8 million on their manager while they spent all that money to get their new manager to leave Milwaukee and come to Chicago. And Milwaukee is 15 games above 500, despite the fact that Devin Williams, their closer, hasn't pitched this year yet. Christian Yelich is on the IL with a back problem, potentially could never play again. They traded Josh Hader. They've moved off of players. No Brandon Woodruff this year, who's been a Cy Young finalist. They traded Corbin Burns to Baltimore, and they're in first place. 6 games up on the St. Louis Cardinals, 7 games up on the Pirates, 10 games up on the Chicago Cubs and the Cincinnati Reds. I think the Cubs are saying, let's get some talent now while it's available. Baseball trade, Isaac Paredes, okay. Rays then trade Jason Adam, a reliever, to the San Diego Padres, who have been red hot as of late, had won 7 in a row until they lost yesterday in Baltimore. including Dylan Cease throwing a no-hitter on Thursday. Padres should be a playoff team. Padres should be a wild card team. Battling right now with the Mets on the heels of the Braves. Still have the Diamondbacks, Cardinals, Pirates, San Francisco, all in the mix. But Padres are good. They trade Zach Eflin to the Baltimore Orioles. He pitched today against the Blue Jays, went 6 innings, 3 earned runs. Solid 4th or 5th starter. Has pitched in the postseason before. I like Zach Eflin. I think he's good. I don't mind that. But the Rays and the Jays are just offloading players to contending teams. Offloading players to teams that believe that they can compete for a championship this year and the Cubs. But looking at it so far, Seattle needed a bat. They got Randy Arozarena, also from the Tampa Bay Rays. And they get Justin Turner. So they get some help with their hitting, which has been abysmal. They also add Jaime Garcia to their bullpen. I think they know that it's going to be a dogfight the rest of the year. It's going to be a battle between them and Houston. And Texas is still in the race because they're 4.5 back despite the fact that they got swept this weekend in Toronto. So I'm not ruling Texas out yet because I don't think the Astros are that good or the Mariners. They're not consistent enough. Seattle's going, okay, we need to win this division. We need to make the playoffs. We spent a lot of money. They're going to try to do it. So I like what they've done. Yankees get Jazz Chisholm, who's a good player, has been interesting at center field for the Yankees. He provides another bat, another quickness on the base pass. Reportedly, they're in talks with the Tigers to acquire Jack Flaherty. So I do think they need another starting pitcher. Carlos Rodon is not reliable. So it's interesting. I look at baseball right now. Till tomorrow, be aggressive. Diamondbacks got a reliever. I don't expect them to do much more because they did a lot in the offseason. I think they're going to say, if we're going to make the playoffs, our team's going to do it. The Mets have been a surprisingly really competitive team. Really competitive. Found a way to play well the last little bit. They'll be in a race the last 2 months to make the playoffs. But they play good baseball. They split with the Braves this weekend. And they start a series with the Minnesota Twins tonight at Citi Field. The Phillies made a baseball move with the Orioles. They get Austin Hayes. The Orioles get Christian Pache in center field. So it helps both teams who I'm sure view themselves as two teams that could meet each other in the World Series. I don't think the Phillies will do a whole lot more than that. They have the best record in baseball. They were the best team in baseball. They had the most All-Stars at the All-Star game, the most representatives. They don't need to do more, quite frankly. This team is going to win or lose based off what they have and the production they get from their great players like Bryce Harper, like Nick Castellanos, like the guys that have been there for a long time. I'd love, Baltimore got Zach Eflin. I'd love to see them get another starting pitcher. If I was them, I would call up the Blue Jays and say, what is the deal on Yusei Kikuchi? Is he available? Can we have him? Is there a trade that makes sense? Crochet doesn't sound like he's going to leave. He could, the White Sox, but it doesn't sound like he's going anywhere. So there's only so many starting pitchers available. Paxton goes to the Red Sox from the Dodgers. There might be a team out there that's surprising. Go, hey, you can have this guy. If you get us a haul of prospects, and we'll try to win down the line. Always a possibility. But I think we kind of know where we are. I think we know who the really good teams are. And I think there's a lot of wildcard teams because of it's expanded who want to stay in the mix, who want to stay in the race. Kansas City, Boston, Seattle all have to make that decision. Diamondbacks, Cardinals, Pirates, San Francisco. What does San Francisco do? Spend a lot of money at the end of free agency to boost up their roster, getting guys like a Blake Snell, who struck out 15 guys in his last start. That could be a huge trade. If Blake Snell is healthy, he can help your team. He's a multiple-time Cy Young winner. And he's been awful so far this year. But maybe he's found it. He'll be great in the last couple months. And all of a sudden, you have an ace on your staff that can pitch for you in the postseason. I think the Yankees are going to call. They know this year is their year. They need to win this year. Aaron Boone knows this is it. I got to do this. I'm only getting so many bullets in the proverbial chamber. So, I don't know. It's interesting. But tomorrow afternoon, Major League Baseball trade deadline will come and go. We will have then 2 months of baseball before the start of the playoffs. And a lot will be decided. A lot will be decided. We have expanded playoffs continuing, 3 wildcard teams, so it keeps people in the hunt longer, which is never a bad thing for baseball. But today you had the Orioles beat the Blue Jays in Game 1 of a doubleheader in Maryland. Game 2 starts in half hour. Justin Turner obviously did not play because, as I said earlier, he was traded to the Seattle Mariners this afternoon. Kevin Kiermaier, Yusei Kikuchi, Trevor Richards all could still be dealt before the deadline tomorrow. For the Blue Jays, we'll wait and see what transpires. But I still think we'll see some deals between now and then. Let's pivot to the NHL. Last week, we got a pile of executive news in the NHL, starting with the Edmonton Oilers, who were in the Stanley Cup final a little over a month ago, hiring Stan Bowman to become the new general manager of their club. Stan Bowman had been out of the league since his time with the Blackhawks, the Kyle Beach situation, and this hiring was met with a lot of skepticism, was met with a lot of angst. And I understand it, but I also don't understand it at the same time. Joel Quenneville and Stan Bowman were reinstated by Gary Bettman. That means any team can hire them. That means they are free to go anywhere. Ken Holland left the Oilers after the Stanley Cup final. He either wants to retire or wants a different opportunity or doesn't want to live in Edmonton. Amen to that. And they need to hire somebody. They had a good free agency despite the fact that they didn't technically have a GM. They kept Henrique. They brought in Jeff Skinner for very low money. They kept their core pieces. They still need to re-sign Leon Draisaitl, but that will happen in due time. But Stan Bowman is a multiple-time Stanley Cup champion winning executive. He drafted Taves and Kane and Keith and built those teams. Brought in smart additions like a Marian Hossa, like an Andrew Ladd in 2010, having Dustin Byfuglien on that roster. He's a smart guy. He knows what he's doing. And yes, he made a wrong decision in the Kyle Beach situation. They should have reported it, and it never should have went down the way that it did. Hard stop. Never. However, if that came to you in the middle of a run to the Stanley Cup final, I'm not sure anybody is making a different decision. It's easy to say you would when you're not in it. It's easy to say, oh, I would definitely report. I wouldn't care about the team at that point. I think it's a bunch of malarkey, quite frankly. It's easy to paint a narrative. It's easy to say you'll do something when you're not in the situation. They did it wrong, but he did a lot of, he went and did therapy. He went and did all kinds of classes. When you do that now in society, to me, that tells you that you're looking for growth. You're trying to improve. You're talking to a therapist. You're going to a shrink. He did it, but now everything's online. Well, how could you hire this guy? Scumbag, this, that, and the third. He's doing what you guys are doing. He's going to therapy. He's talking to people. He's trying to get better, yada, yada, yada. Did anybody get better after going to therapy? I don't fucking know. That's not for me to say. But what I do know is his credentials say he should be hired. He's a winner. He's done this. Why don't we add a veteran executive who's been in these situations to the fold? Yeah, makes sense to me. Stan Bowman made a poor decision, just like Joel Quenneville did, just like players on that team did who knew and did nothing. I would have hired Stan Bowman if I was the Oilers. If I was a coach, if I was the Toronto Maple Leafs, I would have fired Craig Berube and hired Joel Quenneville because I think Joel Quenneville's a better coach. What happened in the past happened in the past. They didn't murder anybody, nothing that bad, and they paid their dues. They went to therapy, what they had to do to be reinstated. The situation was awful. But that doesn't mean that you're just blackballed forever. Not to me anyway. Oilers made the right decision. If the good people think you shouldn't be in the game, okay, then you shouldn't be in the game. I'm not the good people, quote unquote. Columbus finally hired a head coach as well. They hired Dean Evison, who I love. He's one of the scariest guys behind the bench. He's uber intense. He looks like he wants to kill you. And I just like his demeanor. He did an interview on Overdrive last week. If you haven't listened to it, go back. He swears in it, which was funny. And he was honest. He said, I want to kill Minnesota. And they play first game of the year, Columbus, Minnesota. Minnesota's his old team. He goes, I want to crush them. There's no pleasantries. He said, I shouldn't have been fired there. And they fired me. Screw them. I want to go in there and kick their ass. Love that answer. Love that answer. They got a young team. They still have to decide what they're going to do with Patrick Laine. They hired Donnie Waddell this offseason to be their new GM/president of hockey ops. They re-signed Kent Johnson yesterday. They re-signed Kirill Marchenko, who's a young goal scorer. Werenski will be back healthy. So they have some young pieces. I don't think they'll be a great team this year. I don't think they'll be a playoff team, despite the fact that they'll be playing in the Metropolitan Division, which is the more winnable division, the more competitive division for sure. But you look, Konechny got a big deal in Philly. He was on my trade bait board for a long time because I think he's super talented, super elite. Flyers, who are probably leaning more towards a rebuild, not competitive right away, say, we want to keep him. Good leader, really good player, brings a lot to the table, can help a Matvei Michkov transition to the NHL next year. That's what they're doing in the Metropolitan Division. I like it, but I like the signing of Dean Evison as the new head coach. I think he's a good hire. I think you have a guy with experience. Him or Jay Woodcroft would have been the choice for me, who's the former head coach of the Edmonton Oilers. We'll wait and see. Jay Woodcroft will be an NHL head coach again in the not-too-distant future. We also got a pair of signings in the NHL today. Carolina re-signed Marty Necas to a 2-year, $13 million contract. A guy who was rumored to be leaving, hated his role in Carolina. His dad talked about it during interviews in the Czech Republic. But he gets $6.5 million a season. Carolina lost a lot of players this offseason. 25 goals last year. He's improving every year in his goal scoring. They lose Gensel, they lose Brady Shea, they lose Brett Pesce. They still have to sign Seth Jarvis, who's an RFA, who's a stud. So I like their team. I still do. I love Rob Brendamore, but Marty Necas staying makes them a hell of a lot more competitive. And I think they're thrilled to continue to have him in Carolina. Also today, the Minnesota Wild, who will play Columbus in their first game of the year, re-signed Brock Faber, the Calder Trophy finalist, to an 8-year, $68 million extension today. Brock Faber almost played 25 minutes a game last year for Minnesota. You might not know that because Minnesota wasn't that great. They're not a high-profile team. They didn't make the playoffs. But he played in all 82 games. He averaged 24 minutes and 58 seconds a game. He was second in the Calder Trophy race. I think he should have won it over Connor Bedard, but that's another story for another day. He is awesome. Great skater. His defending is improving game over game. He's going to be more on the power play next season, utilized more. Already kind of a veteran on that team, already a guy that you can put on the ice in key situations. We saw the Senators do this with Jake Sanderson. Jake Sanderson's the best defenseman on the Ottawa Senators. He surpassed Thomas Chabot. I believe they have him at a steal at that number. 8.5 for Brock Faber will be a steal as well. In particular, because you're getting him for 8 years. What Ottawa and Minnesota are doing are smart because these guys are getting better. The defensemen are so valuable. When you have a great defenseman, you never let him leave because they're so hard to replace. Brock Faber's a stud for years. He was a stud in college. He's a stud in the NHL. He is the best defenseman already on that team. He's their future. You can build around him. Again, 25 minutes a night, those kind of points. He does have some physical nature to his game. He is a Drew Doughty-esque defenseman where he can do it all for a team. You just don't realize it. He's not a flashy guy. Love this signing from Minnesota by Bill Guerin. It makes too much sense. And you're going to buy up years that he's going to want more money during that. And guess what? He signed the deal. He's going to make 8.5 when players around him are making $11, $12 million, and you got him at that number. And you keep him in Minnesota. That's another thing. Not everybody wants to play in Minnesota. You don't want, okay, let's go to Minneapolis. No thanks. I'll go elsewhere. So I like it. I like it a lot for Minnesota. I like the deal for Carolina to remain competitive. Keaton Marty Neckash, short term, so you can trade him if you want down the line. But some NHL news on late July on a Monday. I'm all for it. We got a little over a month until NHL training camps. So, funny stuff. Finally, to close today, we got this past weekend, we had UFC 304 in Manchester, England. And it was an interesting card. A lot of people said they didn't like it. Oh, it was an intriguing card. Good fights. You saw guys like Mick Parkin, who scored a first-round knockout, undefeated UK heavyweight. Just like Aspinall, climbing up the ranks, will certainly be a contender one day, taking out everybody in his path. Great to see that. Oban Elliott, the Welsh gangster, on the early prelims, wins another fight, undefeated in the UFC, beating Preston Parsons. So good victory for him. Sam Patterson gets back in the win column with a submission victory over Kiefer Crosby. Modestas Boskowskis, light heavyweight, submits Marcin Brachnio in the third round. We then got to Muhammad Mahayev Manil Kaub, which was on the prelims, the first fight of the prelims that was supposed to be on the main card. But clearly, the UFC knew what they were doing. These two guys were throwing stuff at each other, getting into fights on fight week, and they get in the cage and they have one of the biggest stinkers on the card. No action, not an interesting fight, all bark, no bite. Muhammad Mahayev beats Manel Kape via decision. He's now 13-0, 23 years old. He's in the cage calling for a title fight, and Dana White gets on the presser after and says, yeah, no, we're not re-signing him. His contract's up. We wish him best of luck in the PFL. He really kicked him on the way out. Mahayev's been a problem. He's been a problem every fight. He's doing stuff. He's getting into fights, antics, the bullshit. And I think they were sick of it. He is a good fighter. He's never lost. Unfortunately, the PFL doesn't really have a flyweight division. He could go to one championship and fight Demetrius Johnson, which could be interesting. Independent circuits, potentially go to Bellator. But I don't disagree with UFC. I do think the guy's a pain in the ass. I do think the guy doesn't put on great fights. He is undefeated, and he would be a fresh matchup for Alejandro Pantoja, who is the flyweight champion of the world. But clearly, they don't feel he's worth the pain. Jake Hadley wins his bantamweight debut against Callan Loughran. Fun fight. Hadley looked great at 135, formerly a flyweight, moves up in weight. Great. Bruna Brazil defeats Molly McCann. Really a tough fight for Molly. She was never in it. To me, she lost every round. Bruna Brazil, just with her wrestling, getting her in bad situations, beating her up. Nathaniel Wood defeats Daniel Pineda via decision. That's when we got to the main card. Arnold Allen, back in the win column, wins a fun fight over Giga Chikadze. Love Arnold Allen. Lost to Max Holloway, lost to Movsar Evloev, but you're talking about two guys that are elite. Evloev's never lost in a fight, and Max Holloway's Max Holloway. Gregory Rodriguez defeats Christian Leroy Duncan, and that's when we got to the meat of things. Paddy Pimblett, Bobby Green, interesting fight, interesting build. First round, they're striking. Bobby Green can't really get to him. He decides to shoot. Paddy sees it coming, locks him in a guillotine, then maneuvers it into a triangle choke. And King Green then just gets caught in an armbar and he passes out. Doesn't tap, completely goes to sleep. Paddy Pimblett will now join the lightweight rankings. He signed a new UFC contract. And he has his issues. He's not a perfect fighter, but a huge finish for him. The biggest win of his career by far. And Paddy Pimblett gets the crowd going. They don't like him all that much. They love the Manchester. They don't like him a lot anywhere else. But he's got fun fights. You look at Renato Moicano. That could be fun for him down the line. Benoit Saint Denis could be a fun fight for him down the line. Looking at the lightweight rankings just quickly here. RDA, who's a vet, could be a fun fight. Jalen Turner, the Tarantula. Dan Hooker. Rafael Fiziev could be fun. A lot of strikers that he'd have to go up against. But big win for Paddy Pimblett. Then you got the co-main event, Tom Aspinall, Curtis Blades 2. And Tom Aspinall knocks out Curtis 1 minute in the first round. He has the shortest ring time in UFC history for a guy with as many fights as he does. Defends the interim heavyweight title, then says to John Jones, "You might be the undisputed champion, but I'm the best in the world." Great line. I don't think John Jones wants anything to do with Tom Aspinall, because I think Tom Aspinall is going to beat him. Tom Aspinall is the best heavyweight in the world. Tom Aspinall is young. He's fresh. He's quick. He's a great striker. John Jones is reportedly going to fight Stipe Miocic November at Madison Square Garden. If that happens, it should be John Jones and Tom Aspinall, but I have a feeling John Jones or Stipe, whoever wins, is going to retire after that fight because they know what's coming to them if they stick around. John Jones is 38 years old. He's not a young pup anymore. Tom Aspinall is young. He's fresh. He's hungry. He wants these big fights. He's so quick on his feet. His striking's fantastic. You can't get close to him. He knocked out Sergey Pavlovich in the first round. He knocked out Marcin Debora in the first round. He knocked out Curtis Blades in the first round. That's his last 3 fights. All victories, all in the first round. He says he'll be the backup fighter in New York. Aspinall Jones would be box office stuff. Be thoroughly entertaining. But Tom Aspinall is the best heavyweight in the world, period. We then got to the main event. Leon Edwards defending his title against Belal, remember the name, Muhammad. And in Manchester, this fight started around 5:30 in the morning. And it was a 5-round fight. Belal, to me, winning 3 rounds to 2. Using his wrestling, using improved striking from Belal Muhammad to put himself in good situations, to control Leon Edwards. Leon Edwards did not look like he wanted to be in there. His coaches tried to wake him up a little bit, but Belal, first 2 rounds, easy. He won the 4th round, easy. You could say he won the 5th round as well. I gave it to Leon, landing those big elbows late in the 5th round and busting open Belal Muhammad. But there was no controversy when you got to the scorecards. Belal won at least 3 rounds. He controlled the fight. He was the better fighter. He looked great. And, Dana White kind of said it wasn't that interesting. He goes, it wasn't a barn burner by any means. He doesn't love wrestlers. Habib was different because Habib was entertaining for a different reason, just his aura, just his personality. Belal wants to be Habib, but he isn't. But he's a great fighter. He's won 11 straight fights, a great wrestler. And he's the new welterweight champion of the world. What happens now in the division? There's a lot of different possibilities. You have guys like Jack Della Maddalena, who's been on a run. You have Shavkat Rakhmonov, who has not fought since December, and he's undefeated, 18 fights, 18 finishes. If I'm the UFC, I'm booking Belal against Shavkat. It might only be in early 2025, but I'm doing that because I think Shavkat is that good. I am then booking Ian Gary and Leon Edwards. One Irish, one from the UK. Title eliminator. You have that fight, and I would book Jack Della Maddalena and Kamaru Usman for later this year. The welterweight division is loaded with talent. Loaded with guys who want to be champion, who feel they have a right to say that they could be in the title mix. Leon Edwards could get an automatic look at the title. I wouldn't if I'm the UFC because I think there's too many fun fights. There's too many guys knocking at the door. For the middleweight division, giving Israel Adesanya a look at Dricus makes sense because there's a story there. And other than Strickland, there's not really a guy that makes sense. We just saw Strickland and Duplessis fight in Toronto in January. So you get a fresh matchup. You have 3 fights there in the top of the welterweight division that make a lot of sense. They're a lot of fun. You also got Michael Venom Page, who's still kicking around, who, yes, he lost to Ian Gary, but I still think he has a lot of upside. You can book him in a lot of fun fights. It looks like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson might fight before the end of the year against Joaquin Buckley. Fun fight. Sean Brady, Gilbert Burns are fighting in September. Fun fight. Colby Covington needs a dance partner. Who's that going to be? Neil Magny's fighting Michael Morales next month. Kevin Holland, you have in there. Vicente Luque was supposed to fight Nick Diaz. That got called off. Do you go MVP against Vicente Luque potentially before the end of the year? But welterweight's got so many good fighters. It's loaded with talent. Great division. Love it. I thought it was a solid card. It leaves you with a lot of different options moving forward. Also, this weekend we learned about the Sphere card, which is the second weekend in September. And headlining that card will be Sean O'Malley defending his bantamweight title against Merab Davishvili. Great fight. Tons of intrigue there. Two guys. Sean O'Malley beat Aljamain Sterling. Merab is really one of Aljo's best friends, the training partners. So there's history there. Also on the card, Alexa Grasso will fight Valentina Shevchenko for the third time. The trilogy, they fought at Noche UFC last year. They are the two coaches on The Ultimate Fighter this season. Makes total sense. First two fights have been awesome. Love it. Supposed to fight at 303. Brian Ortega, Diego Lopez in the featherweight division. Two studs. Great fight. Diego Lopez, toughest fight of his career. We'll see against T-City. Raul Rojas Jr. against Quilling Aori. Raul is a Mexican fighter. Love him. Irene Aldana, former title challenger on the card. So it's the prelims are not loaded with brand names, so to speak, but you have good fights, a lot of Mexican representation, which is what you want. So I don't think it's the best card in the world, but I do think it has a lot of interesting fights. I do think it's solid. The main event is awesome. The co-main event's awesome. The third fight in the card's awesome. So 10 fights at the Sphere, UFC 306 in September. I'm all for it. This weekend, we got UFC in Abu Dhabi, which is a really good card, despite the fact that Nick Diaz is not going to be on it. Corey Sandhagen, Umar Nurmagomedov headline. Sharabutin Magomedov, Michael Jacek, Marlon Chito Vera, Davison Figueiredo. What a fight in bantamweight. Tony Ferguson, Michael Chiesa, Mackenzie Dern, Lupi Godinez. Prelims, Alonzo Menafield, Amzat Moroskanov, Jay Herbert, Rolando Badoya. Great, really good card. Afternoon card in the Middle East. Can't wait to see it. I'll have to tape it because I'm going to a wedding, but I will be watching it Sunday morning. I guarantee you that. Maybe Saturday night if I can find the time. It was great to be back with all of you. I miss doing this. On Wednesday, we'll be back. We're going to talk MLB trade deadline. We're going to preview UFC Abu Dhabi this weekend. We'll get into some more NFL storylines as they develop. So all of that is forthcoming. We also have the Olympics ongoing, so we'll discuss that in further detail. Great to be back. Thanks for hanging out with me today. Until next time, I'm Noah Warren, and this is To The Point.